The Industrial Revolution. Like any major event in history, the beginning is just as important as the end, and so we begin with the dawn of the Industrial Age. For thousands of years after the rise of civilization, most people lived and worked in small farming villages. A chain of events set in motion in the mid-1700s changed that way of life forever. The Industrial Revolution started in Britain. Unlike most political revolutions, it was neither sudden nor swift. Instead, it was a long, slow, uneven process in which production shifted from simple hand tools to complex machines. New sources of power replaced human and animal power. In the 250 years since it began, the Industrial Revolution has spread from Britain to the rest of Europe and North America, and then around the globe.
The sun makes its course by the eve across the sky. Baby, be just as sure. I'll get up and wipe my eyes. I'll get up and wipe my eyes.
A turning point in history. In 1750, most people worked the land using simple handmade tools. They lived in simple cottages lit by firelight and candles. They made their own clothes and grew their own food. In nearby towns, they might exchange goods at a weekly outdoor market. Like their peasant ancestors, these people knew little of the world that existed beyond their village. The few who left home traveled only as far as their feet or a horse-drawn cart could take them. Those bold adventurers who dared to cross the seas were at the mercy of winds that filled bellowing sails. Then, the Industrial Revolution began. For growing numbers of people, the rural way of life began to disappear. By the 1850s, many country villages had grown into industrial towns and cities. Their inhabitants bought food and clothing in stores that offered a large variety of machine-made goods. They worked indoors behind a counter, desk, or factory machine. Their homes were multi-story tenements. Industrial age travelers moved rapidly by train or steamship. Urgent messages flew along telegraph wires. New inventions and scientific firsts poured out each year. Between 1840 and 1855, for example, an American dentist used an anesthetic for the first time. A French physicist measured the speed of light, and a German chemist developed the Bunsen burner. Elias Howe made the first sewing machine, and a Hungarian doctor introduced antiseptic methods to reduce the risk of women dying in childbirth. Still more stunning changes occurred in the next century, creating our familiar world of skyscraper cities and carefully tended suburbs. Cars and televisions, air travel and antibiotics, and a mass of other goods and services made their appearance. Questions such as how and why these great changes occurred are debated by historians today. And historians also point to a series of interrelated causes that helped trigger the industrialization of the West. A new agricultural revolution. Oddly enough, the Industrial Revolution was made possible in part by a change in the farming fields of Western Europe. About 300 years ago, a second agricultural revolution took place. It greatly improved the quality and quantity of farm products. Some improved methods of farming were led by the Dutch in the way of a new agricultural revolution. In the 1600s, they built earthen walls known as dikes to reclaim land from the sea. They combined smaller fields into larger ones to make better use of the land and used fertilizer from livestock to renew the soil. In the 1700s, British farmers expanded on Dutch experiments. Some farmers mixed different kinds of soils to get higher crop yields. Others tried out new methods of crop rotation. Lord Charles Townshend won the nickname Turnip Townshend. for urging farmers to grow turnips, which restored exhausted soil. Jethro Tull invented a mechanical device, the seed drill, to aid farmers. It deposited seeds in rows rather than scattering them wastefully over the land. Another pioneer, Robert Bakewell, bred stronger horses for farm work and fatter sheep and cattle for meat. Educated farmers exchanged news of experiments through farm journals. King George III himself, nicknamed Farmer George, wrote articles about his model farm near Windsor Castle. The enclosure movement. Meanwhile, rich landowners pushed ahead with enclosure, the process of taking over and fencing off land formerly shared by peasant farmers. In the 1500s, they had enclosed land to gain pastures for sheep and increased wool output. By the 1700s, they wanted to replace the strip farms of medieval times with larger fields that could be cultivated more efficiently. As millions of acres were enclosed, farm output rose. Profits also rose because large fields needed fewer people to work them. But such progress had a human cost. Many farm laborers were thrown out of work. Small farmers were forced off their land because they could not compete with large landholders. Villages shrank as cottagers left in search of work. In time, jobless farm workers migrated to towns and cities. There, they formed a growing labor force that would tend the machines of the Industrial Revolution.
The population explosion. The agricultural revolution contributed to a rapid growth of population. This population explosion has continued, although today the center of growth has shifted from the Western world to developing nations outside Europe. Precise population statistics for the 1700s are rare, but those that do exist are striking. Britain's population, for example, soared from about 5 million in 1700 to almost 9 million in 1800. The population of France rose from 18 million in 1715 to 26 million in 1789. The population of Europe as a whole shot up from roughly 120 million to about 190 million in the same period. Such growth was unlike in any earlier history. Yet in the 1800s, population would climb still higher. The population boom of the 1700s was due to more declining death rates rather than to rising birth rates. The agricultural revolution reduced the risk of famine. Because they ate better, women were healthier and had stronger babies. Some deadly diseases, such as bubonic plague, had faded away. In the 1800s, better hygiene and sanitation, along with improved medical care, further slowed deaths from disease. An energy revolution. A third factor that helped trigger the Industrial Revolution was an energy revolution. From the beginning of human history, the energy for work was provided mostly by the muscle of humans and animals. In time, water mills and windmills were added to muscle power. In the 1700s, inventive minds found ways to use water power more efficiently. Giant water wheels powered machines in the first factories. People also harnessed new sources of energy. Among the most important was coal, used to develop the steam engine. In 1712, inventor Thomas Newcomen had developed a steam engine powered by coal to pump water out of mines. About 1769, James Watt improved on Newcomen's engine. Watt's steam engines would become the vital power source of the early Industrial Revolution.
In the late 1700s, most people worked in the fields, on land they did not own. Those who owned the land, called aristocrats, lived refined lives in elegant manor houses. Servants raised their children and did their housework. The landowners and the people who worked for them depended upon each other. It was a system that had existed for centuries. In towns across England and the United States, a series of extraordinary innovations would alter the way people lived and worked for the next 150 years. Inventors had found new ways to harness nature's energy. They built new kinds of machines powered by water, steam, and coal. The new machines replaced hand-powered tools. They did the same work, only cheaper and faster. Much of the work was done outside the home, in specially designed buildings, the first factories. Mechanization began in the textile mills of England, where one machine attached to a spinning wheel could do the work of 50 people. Fuel, clothing, and food all became more affordable. With the development of locomotives and steamboats, manufactured goods could now be sold halfway around the world. Families moved from the villages of their ancestors to new industrial towns. And a new class of people emerged, workers who produced goods. Industrialists, the people who owned the factories, employed hundreds, sometimes thousands of people. And they made enormous profits in their industrial centers. But while the Industrial Revolution brought wealth to some and jobs for others, it came with a price tag. Pollution from coal-powered factories turned the cities black. Lack of housing created the first urban slums. And the demand for more and more goods and higher profits brought the exploitation of workers, including children. Some of the worst conditions were seen in the textile mills of New England. In the 1830s, a 10-year-old mill girl described her life.
We were paid $2 a week, and the working hours of all the girls extended from 5 o'clock in the morning till 7 in the evening, with 1.5 hour for breakfast and for dinner.
It was the hiring of children, some as young as 5 years old, throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, that outraged the public. Workers and reformers protested. They formed unions and associations and fought for government regulations to limit the workday and protect children. These laws helped address many of the abuses brought on by the Industrial Revolution. Today, we are in the middle of another revolution, a technological revolution. We live in what's called the global village, because we can connect with people around the world as if they lived next door. And we can now work anytime and anywhere. We will have to wait and see where this new revolution leads.